Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I invite everybody to stretch a little bit wherever you are and let that spring air come into your body. If it makes you feel good, like it does me, just stand up out of your chair and let the air in. Don't forget to open the heart chakra, tap it awake. Always a good idea to wake up the mind. Send it some love. Belly, kidneys, base chakra, legs. Shake off whatever doesn't serve you today. Gratitude for all that needs to be going right for us to be together today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for trusting me with a little bit of your time. Welcome to Post-Human Infrastructure 2.0. For some of you, this is also the first class you've taken with me, and there's absolutely no reason to worry about having missed 1.0. 1.0 was essentially a seminar where some of us at Metabolic Studio introduced our embodied practice in caring for 2 1/2 acre industrial brownfields on the edge of the LA River in downtown LA over a 7-year period, and what we've been up to and what we've learned, and trying to speak from personal experience about what we do in order to move toward a pedagogy or principles that can be taught to others. And all of that information, if you ever want to see any of it, is on our Discord under the title Water Community Power. So you can go to Post-Human Infrastructure and see the Zoom classes for each of the 7 weeks, as well as see the readings. So it's all available to you. In this particular class, I wanted to focus more on studio practice than on seminar. And because 7 weeks is a long time to build a piece of infrastructure, especially a speculative one, we're going to focus on how language and how art practice can create potential futures through thinking through speculative ecologies that we'd like to embody and see in the world. So to start the class today, I've asked my colleague Mary Rose to just read the description of the course we've all signed up for, because there's a lot of big words in it, to ground us all collectively in this Zoom space. And then we'll go around in a form of popcorn introductions that we like to do, where she'll say her name, her pronouns, where she's calling in from today, and pass it off to someone on the Zoom who will say the same. So welcome, Mary Rose.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So good to see familiar and new faces. And welcome to Post-Human Infrastructure. In this online course, we will explore the concept of post-human infrastructure through the construction of speculative ecologies centered around water-based ecozones. We will start by examining the ways in which human infrastructure have impacted these ecozones and identify the challenges that they face. Each student will choose a specific ecozone and explore it in depth, asking themselves what their biggest concern for that area is. We will be reading James Bridle's Ways of Being and other essays by other authors that focus on water and the underland to provide a theoretical foundation for our exploration. Students will work together in groups to create solutions embedded in speculative ecologies, incorporating insights from their individual research and group discussions. By the end of the course, Students will have developed a deep understanding of the complex relationships between human infrastructure and natural systems. They will have developed the skills to imagine and create innovative solutions that prioritize sustainability and the well-being of the ecosystems they inhabit. And I love to share also the Lauren Bond and the Metabolic Studios phrase, artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. And with that, my name is Mary Rose. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm calling in from Topanga, California. And why don't we go ahead and jump over to Jack.
This work? Yes. I'm Jack. I've been working at a Metabolic Studio doing mapping and geospatial work with, the Colorado River and large infrastructures. Really excited to be here in this course, kind of explore it from a different perspective, review it in a more kind of study-based way, like from the perspective of studying it as a student. And then that means I get to explore it on my own terms, which is interesting. So I'll pop it to Alexandra.
And Alex, if you could just name and where you're calling in from and what your pronouns are, and then you can jump around.
Yes, I'm Alex. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling from the ancestral land of the Wampanoag and Narragansett people, what is known today as Providence, Rhode Island. And I will popcorn it to Michelle.
Thank you, and hi everyone. My name is Michelle Pearson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from just outside of Philadelphia, PA in Wynwood. I will popcorn it to Nicholas.
Kia ora. My name is Nicholas. I'm calling from Te Mata Maui in New Zealand. My pronouns are he, him, and I'll pass it along to Jasmine.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. I'm calling in from East Hollywood, LA. And I will pass it on to Harold.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Harold calling in from Kilauea on Kauai in Hawaii. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I will pass it on to Constance.
Hi, my name is Constance, she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Awanga, which is an hour northeast of San Diego. And I'll pass it to Jess. Jess, you're muted.
Okay, I'm Jess. I'm calling from deepest Appalachia, that is West Virginia, the ancestral home of the Cherokee Shawnee peoples. And Rainey, your turn.
Hey, Rainey, she, her, land of the coast Miwok, San Rafael, California, Northern California. And I think that's it. Let's see. Teresa.
That's funny because I'm from San Rafael. My name is Teresa Laddish. My pronouns are she and they. Right now I'm in Park City, Utah, but I live in San Francisco now. And I'm working on a piece of public land that is on the Iceless Creek in Ohlone territory. To someone, Mohit.
Yeah, I hope it works. I hope you can hear me. Hello, I'm Mohit. I'm speaking from India. I use he and him pronouns. I'm an artist. I'm interested with waste infrastructure, water bodies, and working around it. It's rainy here. I'm at nearby Delhi, which is Haryana, and speaking from there. Yeah, I will pass on to Yeva.
Hi, I'm Yeva. I'm calling in from Glendale, California, and I use she, her pronouns. And I will pass it to, let's see, Jamie Grace.
Hello, I'm Jamie Grace. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Palm Springs, land of Cahuilla Nation. I will pass it to I think it's Kelly Yee. I can't see the very last bit of your name. Is that right, Kelly Yee?
Kelly Shi, yes, hi.
Okay, hi.
Great to see all of you. I'm calling in from Chicago, Illinois, she, her pronouns. Is that all we're doing? Sorry, I was a little bit late. Okay. Who hasn't gone yet? Has everybody else gone?
No, me?
Oh, okay. Yes,
Kelly.
take the floor, all yours.
Yeah, I'm Rui Cesar Campos. I live in Fortaleza, Brazil. Pronouns he, him. And yes, I've been working the last years with infrastructure as a theme. Fortaleza is a hub for submarine cables, and I work with this subject. I'm very excited for this course.
Well, thank you, everybody, for those lovely introductions. And what a privilege it is to be living in a time and space where the communications infrastructure that we live with allows satellites to bounce our image and our voice very close to real time to continents adrift in several oceans around the world. What an opportunity it is for us to share what we observe in our own embodied spaces and how we can take those observations as practicing artists, designers, thinkers, architects, to start to build speculative ecologies which are desperately needed, to build a culture of care and interdependence. So I rejoice in the possibilities that NATO and the alternative school have provided us to step into this precarious moment, this child of COVID, this school, which is building on what community can mean in a multidimensional universe. So in that regard, I also wanted to call in an ancestor today, which I left in our reading, but I wanted to call her in through a quick reading of the foreword. I don't know if any of you got a chance to read the Joan Didion essay, but I consider her a wonderful ancestor for post-human infrastructure because she was fully aware when she wrote White Album that she was not indigenous, but she was deeply from someplace. And that being from someplace gave her particular sensitivities to write about the meaning of water and infrastructure to her. So now I have too many things on my desk. Here we are, holy water. I'm going to bring this up for a second and bring in Joan to our introductions today. Holy water. Some of us who live in arid parts of the world think about water with a reverence others might find excessive. The water I will draw tomorrow from my tap in Malibu is today crossing the Mojave Desert from the Colorado River. And I like to think about exactly where that water is. The water I will drink tonight in a restaurant in Hollywood is by now well down the Los Angeles aqueduct from the Owens River. And I also think about exactly where that water is. I particularly like to imagine it as it cascades down the 45-degree stone steps that aerate Owens water after its airless passage through the mountain pipes and siphons. As it happens, my own reverence for water has always taken the form of this constant meditation upon where the water is, of an obsessive interest not in the politics of water, but in the waterworks themselves, in the movement of water through aqueducts and siphons and pumps and forebays and afterbays and weirs and drains, in plumbing on a grand scale. I know the data on water projects, and I will never see. I know the difficulty Kaiser had closing the last two sluiceway gates on the Guri Dam in Venezuela. I keep watch on evaporation behind the Aswan in Egypt. I can put myself in sleep, imagining the water dropping 1,000 feet into turbines at Churchill Falls in Labrador. If the Churchill Falls project fails to materialize, I fall back on waterworks closer at hand. The tail race at Hoover on the Colorado, the surge tank in the Tehachapi Mountains that receives California aqueduct water, pumped higher than water has ever been pumped before. And finally, I replay a morning when I was 17 years old and caught in a military surplus life raft in the construction of the Nimbus Afterbay Dam on the American River near Sacramento. I remember that at the moment it happened, I was trying to open a tin of anchovies with capers. I recall the raft spinning into the narrow chute through which the river had been temporarily diverted. I recall being deliriously happy. I'd like to sit with that for 5 minutes and ask a question of you. How about you? What do you remember about water wherever you are? Do you remember a time that you swam in a dam or a piece of infrastructure? Do you remember a time somebody you love took you to a stream for the first time to get a drink from water that flowed freely and how that felt? Do you remember a story one of your elders or ancestors or friends told you about water that has stuck in your mind as something really different from how you think of water today? Do you have any specific comments on Joan's writing? Let's give it a little space. I'll be quiet and let us practice the art of listening to each other and not trying to fill every Zoom second with sound. It's also fine to just sit here and pull up the reading on Joan that you have as a PDF. But I invite anybody to jump in and share a story. I'll start now that I've talked about in praise of silence. I learned recently that my ancestors were Kabbalistic witches from a specific part of Lithuania that used to call the whispering grandmas, whispering babkas. And they would go to flowing streams nearby. And as rocks and pebbles would enervate the stream flowing, excuse me, that's not a whispering babka, that's Stromsky, that as the stream would go, they would whisper incantations. into the flowing stream collectively that would conjure potential futures for their communities. And that really struck me, you know, because I didn't know that story until this year when one of my friends asked me a very good question in New York when I was there and brought some sage that grew out of once buried floodplain material that we pulled out at Metabolic from underneath the LA River. This sage sprung out after nearly 80 years of being buried, and I brought it to New York to share. And one of my students there, who is indigenous, asked me why I brought an indigenous plant to share and not a plant from my own cultural tradition. And I said, I actually brought it because it surprised me that the sage represented itself after 80 years. And I wanted to share that power of native seed, even to live without oxygen and sunlight for 80 years. But that's a very good question. What would my ancestors have brought to share? I don't actually know. So this is another good reason to share these stories. You never know what you learn from each other. So that's what I wanted to share. And then I was particularly happy to see Hilton Alls curate a show about Joan Didion recently at the Hammer. And I had no idea how much part of her practice, the infrastructure of the watershed of the Greater West was for her, how formative it was. So I wanted to start that with you. That's my share. I'll leave it open to you now.
I have, oh, go ahead.
Hi, Harold. I feel called to share, particularly inspired, Lauren, by my father's lineage comes from Latvia and have studied a bit, and I'm very intrigued by that part of the world, the Baltic states being the last pagan cultures in Europe, the last to be colonized, and still probably in many ways the closest connections in traditional communication and arts with the land and communication. Last night, after reading the inspiring story by Joan Didion, what came to my mind was an experience I had, and I can share my screen. I do tea ceremonies. That's one of the practices and mediums I work with, and the most memorable tea ceremony was on the bank of a now decommissioned lock on the Sacramento River. And so it's this human-made canyon, but it's enormous enough, and it has it's mostly wood and metal, so they're sort of primal materials, and making tea on this human-made canyon that's now been decommissioned and is decaying. It embodies natural formations and erosion. And one thing that was particularly inspiring while we were sitting there having tea over I think it was like maybe 5 hours, were there were a gang of boys, and I think there were some girls there, and they snuck in as we did, and they would on weekends practice jumping off the edge of this enormous canyon and doing backflips. And so there was this playful, primal way of expressing adventure and challenge, and in a very, it seemed, holistic and wholesome way. And I can share a few pictures if I have the ability to share my screen.
Let's wait on that, Harold,
Okay.
to keep the conversation going, but we'd love to see it later.
Can I jump in? So it's not so much a story, more of like an equivalency that came up for me listening to this. And when we think about waterways and our own bodies and the relationship of veins and rivers and tributaries, it makes me think about where is the blood in my own body and what is that flow? And it just leaves me with this interesting question about that relationship between the two.
Do you mind if I share as well? I'm just going to step outside because it's family's so asleep. One thing that I've just learned recently is that locally there's lots of lakes and ponds and things that were traditional hunting grounds for birds, but that there was one local chief who was considered so sacred that the lake that he bathed in was not allowed to be hunted from. And this lake doesn't exist anymore. It was drained and it is gone. And what you were sharing, Rainey, brought that up in my mind around what the relationship between the human body and these bodies of water, what happens when these spaces are gone, and are they gone? Where is it now? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I've been thinking lately about, so my father is from Uganda, but my mom is from Los Angeles. And in Uganda, is on the banks of Lake Victoria, which is the largest water source in Africa, and it's where the Nile actually starts. And my father immigrated here, and it's always been, this lake has always been a space of myth, a space of just like, you can look on a map and locate it, but it's always in the mind, almost like a place of like, it meant so much to him. But for me, it's just almost like this ancestral myth, almost like this body of water. And like what this conversation about around like streams, around like one meditation I think with often is like the fish from the lake that nourished him helped to create me, you know, like all these ways that the water provides, and like almost like those fish become a part of the ancestral realm for me as well. And like, I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot about how one of the things that colonization steals from us is this, it becomes a myth and not real, but with myth also is power, but that almost that power gets kind of lost, but it is something that has to be self-created, like that power of that myth.
I'll jump in. As I'm thinking about the question, I'm, I guess, really thinking about how much water is very much a part of my heritage and where I come from. I was born in Ethiopia off of like the Gilo River, which is a tributary of the Nile, and like my particular people group are very water-based people, and like the sense of all of our, you know, between the fishing industry, like that's crucial, or being able to live off the land because there's a water source that's very conveniently there. And just thinking, like, I've always lived by a river, in like Tennessee and even like in Philly, like I've never not been away from a river, which I think is interesting now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, water is super important to my identity. Yeah.
During the summer, right about when I met Lauren for the first time, I was visiting Alaska, and due to some strange coincidence, I ended up in the Denali National Park, and there I became for the first time aware about the difference between meandering rivers systems and braided river systems. And it was like the first time that I became aware of how the shapes water takes, or the flows, the way what the river wants to become, and having the space. And braided river systems, they're multiple channels that rejoin, like branch and merge as water flows through a landscape. And yeah, it was, I still think about how, like, in our urban infrastructure, water cannot do that. It cannot become the shape it wants to become. So that's a memory that came to me, connected to Lauren too.
I'll go next. I live on a 6-acre piece of land that has, it's small, it's right outside of a small town. And it has a vernal pool in the bottom. It's very diverse, interestingly, for being so small. It's got a lot of different regions. So we have a well on the property. So our drinking water, our used water, comes from the property. And the vernal pool is filled with life right now. There's wood frogs and peepers, frogs that make wonderful sounds at night. And there's salamanders. And it's just a whole churning life in this little vernal pool that then winds its way down to the Greenbrier River, which flows through the 3-county area where I live. And so water is definitely an organizing principle. Oh, I wanted to say one other thing. I have a friend who grew up in Ukraine regarding your story about sage and plants from where we come from and other plants. So she has shared her grandmother's throat tea recipe for me, her Ukrainian grandmother, and about half the herbs that are in the recipe are also grow either are native plants or play well with other plants in the Appalachian region where I am. So I love those plants that are all around the globe in temperate zones, and it's a great throat tea too. Really helps.
I'll jump in. Well, I'm buried in snow here, so water is literally all around me. You can't even see it, but it's dumping snow. But a memory around water, one of my early teachers, Anna Halperin, on her property, instead of a drinking fountain, there's this fountain that just shoots up, and people joke about it. It's part of the practice to try to drink from it, and then there's often a face washing. And whenever I've done that practice in other groups, people are like, what is that? And it looked like there's some other dancers maybe here, so I thought I would share that.
I'll jump in if that's okay. I live in Glendale, so I'm right next to the Verdugo Wash here, which connects to the LA River. Like I can literally see it from my window. It's right next to me. And most of the year it's completely dry. There's nothing there. There's no water flowing through it. It's channelized. So recently we've had a lot of rain in LA, and I can hear the river flowing from my building, which is something that almost never happens. So I haven't really had the opportunity to interact with bodies of water here that often. Only in my childhood, once a year, maybe we would drive to the beach or something like that. But I do have one of my favorite memories of being in a body of water is I visited my friend in Austin a couple of years ago, and we went paddleboarding in the Colorado River in Austin. And we didn't know it at the time. We jumped off the paddleboards, we swam. I've never felt so free in a body of water. And it was probably the best, maybe one of the best days of my entire life. And then only afterwards we found out that you're not supposed to swim in that river because it has really high level of contamination. And no one had told us that. People recreate in the river, but I guess you're not supposed to swim in it. And, we just had this moment of well, you know what? It was the best day ever. I don't care that it was what are we going to do? It was contaminated, but it's just kind of so sad to think that I wouldn't have had that memory if I knew. And I mean, you're not allowed to, you're not supposed to swim in that river. And it's just such a shame that that's taken away from the people who live there because it's been contaminated. And I don't really have a space like that here in Glendale to have that experience. And it's just unfortunate. I have to go maybe drive far away to get that kind of experience. So those are my thoughts on that.
What I would share is not necessarily a first person experience of water, but over the past few months, looking at so many data sets of rivers, and then also trying to visualize mycelium. So being at this macro scale of these many streams, and then looking at the micro scale of what mycelium is doing, or petri dishes of mycelium. It's just amazing to see these networks of energy that form in the earth and at the macro and micro scale, and the kind of fractal nature of both these forms. I just find it so exciting, these geometries and these systems that form from the bird's eye perspective and the zoomed in area of mycelium. So that's kind of where my mind is dwelling right now.
Yeah, I will go next. Yeah, so my kind of reality with water is more reminded by the politics of caste, where the figure of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar drinking water from the public tank produced the politics of equality in India. So the water becomes a site where equality is getting produced, because the water was not allowed to drink by other caste people or community. So my understanding or my kind of response to the water is kind of thinking about politics of equality, which is not related to rivers, but the small ponds or the water, public water taps, and how we formulate them and see them as a public resource, where the kind of politics of religion comes, or the politics of caste comes.
Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. Yeah, I mean, so many of you have shared about water's presence and the absence from water, either culturally through access, or through living in a particularly arid place, or through the overuse of water in contemporary infrastructure combined with climate change. But I want to also bring in the relationship between that and esoteric traditions, where the expectancy and the attendance for things that are not there sharpens our ability to be connected to the interconnectedness of all living things. So if a seed emerges through a crack in a sidewalk, water is there, even if you can't see a river. So there's all kinds of miracles that connect us to the abundance that survives everywhere all around us, even when we don't expect to find it or see it. And, you know, Gandhi's principle of satyagraha was connected to accessibility to water, and how Dr. Vandana Shiva has picked up the idea of satyagraha to talk about the empowerment of indigenous women's networks in India, and her fight for the idea that the resistance to imperialism and colonialism comes in the empowerment we have around the simple seed. The seed will set us free. The ability to understand seed will set us free. And so the monumentality in that tiny thing is so connected to the principle, as I understand it, of empowerment for Dr. Shiva, who picked up Gandhi's term, satyagraha, as a political piece of empowerment. So now I'm going to talk about how we as a cohort can be thankful for each other in a little bit more embodied way. What a privilege it is to sit together in conversation, in time zones around the world, in cultures of vastly different places, and share information. So because the Metabolic Studio is very committed to open sourcing our knowledge base, we will also be trying with the help of the team to build a map that we will share with you next week based on where you're located or where your spirit is located. You can feel you're located more than one place, right? So you can be calling in from Tongva Gabrielino land on the LA River and identify with a babbling brook in Lithuania. That's okay on our map. We are many of us from many different places. In order to build these speculative ecologies, we're really encouraging all of us to stay in a deeply embodied practice. So I wanted to put together a 5-minute break here before I move into the lecture series of our class, where I'll be describing to you a little bit today about the mission statement of Metabolic Studio. Artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. And I'll be describing that through a talk that I've written last night for you that will attempt to describe what post-human infrastructure is in relationship to these narratives we've just said. Then we will break into a 10-minute free writing assignment where I will invite you to write or draw, if that's your way of writing, freely for 10 minutes. And then we will share that writing with a guest listener who will be joining us from Metabolic Studio. So I invite you in this 5-minute period to get a glass of water, get something you may want to write with. We'll also encourage you to write on this cool little tool that you find at the bottom of your Zoom page called a whiteboard. So if you want to write on the whiteboard, that's also a fun thing to explore. Or write today on your computer on a WordPerfect program, or write however you want to write. But the point is feel free, be random. A whiteboard just appeared. You can tap into text, try it out. Hello. This is random. And random leads us to unexpected oases. Try a piece of free writing real quickly. Try it out. Cool. That's a nice class photo. So I'm gonna leave this up for our 5-minute breaks. If people want to play, they can play just to get used to it. It's now where I'm calling in from just shy of 10:15, 12:15 in the Great Lakes, 1:15 on the East Coast. God knows what time it is in New Zealand and India and Hawaii. What time is it in New Zealand?
6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you for being here. Yeah, play around and let's meet back at 10:20 or just stay and play, and I'll see you in a few. Okay, so I think we know how to do this pretty well. Jack, do you want to, is this your whiteboard? Can we save this one? Okay.
I think Jack might still be on break.
Oh, okay. It's my first note. In the meantime, I would like to share this incredible scarf that my friend Sarah made for me about being on the road. I thought as an infrastructure, this is a class about infrastructure and embodied practice. I thought the idea that she took a road trip with me, and as I drove, she crocheted the road the entire journey. I thought, what a wonderful garment to wear for my inaugural lecture. My street cred. Thanks for throwing the whiteboard up for us, Jack. You wanna can you take it down now? I think you just close it.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
No worries, no worries. Just see. So I wanted to introduce our visiting listener for the week, Kelly Majewski. Kelly is a landscape architect by training, an environmental activist through life experience. And she is project managing at Bending the River at Metabolic Studio. So she is somebody I thought would be an exquisite first listener to our writing prompt, our collective writing prompt, and also, you know, will probably give really good feedback in the chat bar as she listens to it, because she's been embedded in the mission statement that artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy, as well as just finished a long but not long enough journey that she went on across Turtle Island, the North American continent, really trying to study where she felt she could be of the greatest use for the greatest number during this time of climate peril. And I thought that journey in and of itself was kind of doing research on speculative ecology. Like, where should we place ourselves? How should we position ourselves when we prioritize human and more than human interdependence, and how to format and frame that? So welcome, Kelly, to Post-Human Infrastructure. Okay, well, I'm gonna allow you to just listen to the lecture. The lecture will end with a whiteboard that I made with the help of Alex, who's on this platform. So we'll go through that together. Alex, when I say, can you load the whiteboard, will you do that for me? Thank you. And then we'll move into our free writing session. Artists, oh, I'm supposed to have been able to shut off all these things. It says do not disturb. Let's see. Toggle. I don't know if I did it or not, but artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. Welcome everyone to this lecture on post-human infrastructure. Today we will explore the meaning of post-human and infrastructure and what it means for us as artists and makers to consider ourselves agents of abundance in the life web. In this course, we will focus on the creation of speculative ecologies. Speculative ecologies are imaginative and theoretical ecosystems that can range from small-scale urban gardens to vast post-apocalyptic landscapes. In this class, the artist's role is to imagine possible worlds rather than worry, not just yet, about how to build them, how to make them, and how to realize them. We will be envisioning speculative ecologies. We will together build a magical necklace of liminal worlds, a network of what-ifs. Post-human refers to a theoretical framework for organizing and designing systems and technologies that are optimized for a world where humans have been enhanced or surpassed by artificial intelligence and other advanced technologies. In essence, post-human infrastructure is a new paradigm. It's a new paradigm for thinking about the relationship between humans and technology in a world where machines are becoming more intelligent and capable of performing tasks that were once the exclusive domain of humans. It's a way of designing systems and technologies that can adapt to the changing needs of a rapidly evolving technological landscape and enable us humans to work more closely with machines to achieve our goals right now for survival. Infrastructure, on the other hand, refers to the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities needed for the operation of a society or enterprise. It includes systems and facilities such as transportation, communication, energy, water. It also includes buildings, building roads, building bridges, and building other physical structures. As artists and as makers, we have a unique opportunity to contribute to the development of post-human infrastructure by creating on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. Our art practice can be both visible and invisible. It can be invisible because of the scale. How can you visualize a watershed of the Intermountain West? Partly underground, because if it's buried under concrete, because it has to be, how do you make sense of it as a visual artist? Or in the atmosphere, as we struggle through the culture where suffocation is a characteristic of our time. Whether our intention itself is ephemerality in praise of the moment. We also have an obligation to speak for all living things, sentient or not, and to emphasize empathy and care for them. We can use technology to build infrastructures based on mutualism, care, and interdependence, creating a world where all beings can thrive. Now, there are various types of infrastructure, as I mentioned, including transportation infrastructure like roads, highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, ports, railways, public transportation, energy infrastructures, including power plants, electrical grids, oil and gas pipelines, nuclear power plants, hydrogen power plants, natural gas distribution networks, and renewable energy systems. Communication infrastructures, which include telephone networks, internet and broadband networks, satellite systems, radio and television broadcasting networks. And lastly, but especially important to our metabolic studio practice, our water infrastructure, which include dams, reservoirs, water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, and distribution systems. While infrastructure is essential for the functioning of a modern society and plays a critical role in promoting economic growth, social development, and quality of life, the design and development of infrastructure has often been focused on meeting human needs and objectives without taking into account the impact on other than human beings, such as wildlife ecosystems and the environment. When we nuclear tested the atom bomb in the Great Basin, we certainly weren't thinking about the thousands of years that the watersheds would be polluted, or that the habitat for the wild equine or desert tortoise would become deathly. Therefore, it is essential to incorporate environmental and social considerations into infrastructure planning and development to ensure sustainable and equitable outcomes. This requires we artists consider the potential impacts of infrastructure on the natural world, on the more than human world, and we take steps to mitigate the damage while also ensuring that infrastructure development benefits all members of society, including marginalized communities and future generations. When designing infrastructure, it is crucial to consider the needs of future generations, as well as the current one. Infrastructure projects generally have a lifespan of several decades. So designers should aim in this class, artists should aim in this class, in writing your speculative ecology to consider the needs and impacts of your vision for at least several hundred or even thousands of years. Designers must, artists must, we must consider the needs and the impacts of many future generations, including the reparation work we inherit from the several generations of people whose needs were never considered in the construction of our infrastructure. Finally, we need to be aware of the increasing amount of space debris floating around in orbit, which can pose a hazard for future generations. We artists and we makers need to walk the walk. We have to be accountable and take ourselves to task to work towards sustainable and responsible post-human infrastructures that benefit all members of society, including at least 7 future generations, and human and other than human beings. For your writing prompt, I will encourage you to reflect on your art practice, reflect on your embodied practice, reflect on your design practice, and think, how can you contribute to the development of sustainable and responsible post-human infrastructures? How can you create art that promotes sustainability, equity, and interdependence with the natural world and other than human beings? What role can we make in shaping the future of infrastructure? And before we get to that writing prompt, I was going to ask Alex to share her whiteboard so that we have some visual insight into current post-human infrastructures that exist in the world in case you're inspired by them to build on these paradigms. I think to see this, I need to go down, right, Alex, to 10%?
Yes, it's one of the limitations of the whiteboard. You cannot see everything enlarged. So if you zoom into different categories. Yes.
So what we put together for you, for us as a class today, let's start with this text. Wildlife crossings would be a really good example of a post-human infrastructure that considers other than human beings. Wildlife crossings are structures that are designed to help animals safely cross roads, highways, and other infrastructure. These crossings can take many forms, such as bridges, tunnels, and underpasses, and are often designed to mimic the natural habitat of the animals in the area. By providing safe passage for wildlife, these crossings can help reduce the negative impacts of the roads and other infrastructures on local infrastructures. So of the ones that Alex has put up for us, I wanted to call out my personal favorite here. Oh, I just zoomed out, I think. I just love this crab wildlife corridor. So each year, millions of crabs on Christmas Island embark on a spectacular migration from the rainforest to the shore, where they mate and release their eggs into the sea. This mass movement of crabs is a crucial event for the island's ecosystem and attracts visitors from around the world. To facilitate the safe passage of the crabs, a network of roads and bridges has been built, creating the Crab Wildlife Corridor. The corridor serves as a protected path for the crabs to cross safely without being disrupted by cars or other hazards, ensuring the continued success of this unique and fascinating natural phenomenon. I'm going to go to the next post-human infrastructure that's currently occurring all over the world: green roofs and walls. Green roofs and walls are structures that incorporate vegetation into the design of buildings and other infrastructure by providing habitat for birds, insects, and other wildlife. Green roofs and walls can help promote biodiversity in urban environments. They can also help reduce energy consumption and improve air quality in cities. So moving over to Alex's wonderful example of some green walls, I'm going to say we select to look at the Bosco Verticale. Extraordinary image, a pair of residential towers in Milan, designed by Stefano Boeri. The towers were completed in 2014 and are known for their unique green facades, which consist of over 20,000 trees and plants arranged to create a vertical forest. The towers are covered in more than 900 trees, 5,000 shrubs, 11,000 perennials, and ground cover plants. The plants were selected for their ability to thrive in the challenging conditions of a tall building and include a mix of evergreen and deciduous species. The green facades in the Bosco Verticale help to filter pollutants from the air, reduce noise pollution, and provide shade, which helps to reduce the need of air conditioning in the apartments. The plants also provide a habitat for birds and insects, which contributes to the biodiversity of the surrounding area. Love that one, Alex. Thank you. Living shorelines. Living shorelines are shoreline stabilization projects that use natural materials and vegetation to protect against erosion and flooding. By using natural materials and promoting the growth of vegetation, living shorelines can help support local ecosystems and improve water quality. Well, I particularly love this way of representation here. So I'm going to sort of suggest that y'all on your own screen, if you can, or can I do it? I don't know. Can I? Is that live linked? No, I don't think whiteboards are live linked. The Coxsackie, New York project. Can I? No. If you press on that link to where it says Habitat Blueprint, they provide you a sliding before and after bar. Are you able to do that?
I think for these purposes, we might have to highlight it and copy it in live sharing.
Okay, maybe we can put it in the chat bar for people to get to later. I'll then just go over to eConcrete, which I think is another amazing project, using biomimicry to create concrete products that mimic the natural properties of coral reefs and other marine ecosystems. For example, the company's bio-enhanced concrete incorporates natural additives that promote the growth of marine organisms and create habitat for marine life in coastal structures like seawalls and breakwaters. These additives include materials like crushed shells, which provide a calcium-rich substrate for marine organisms like corals and mollusks to settle and grow. The company also has developed a concrete mix that incorporates fibers made from seaweed, which help strengthen the concrete and reduce the risk of cracking and erosion. The company's products promote the growth of marine life and contribute to the conservation of coastal ecologies while providing durable and resilient infrastructure for coastal communities. Bioretention basins. Bioretention basins are currently thought of since the 1990s more and more in infrastructure development. Bioretention basins are structures that are designed to collect and treat stormwater runoff. These structures are often planted with native vegetation, which can help filter pollutants from water and provide habitat for wildlife. Let's have a look at a rain garden. Bioretention rain gardens are methods of treating stormwater by pooling water on the surface and allowing filtering and settling of suspended solids and sediment at the mulch layer prior to entering the plant soil microbe complex media for infiltration and pollutant removal. Bioretention techniques are used to accomplish water quality improvement and water quantity reduction. Rain gardens are planted with native species which enhance habitat that is beneficial for insects and wildlife. And another existing form of post-human and other than human infrastructure are solar farms with pollinator-friendly vegetation. Solar farms are increasingly being designed with pollinator-friendly vegetation, such as wildflowers and native grasses, by providing habitat for bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. These solar farms can help support local ecosystems while also producing renewable energy. Here's an example in Minnesota. The Marshall Farm is an example of a solar farm that has incorporated pollinator-friendly habitats into its design. Here are some key details about the project: pollinator habitat, environmental benefits, and partnerships. On a pollinator habitat, the Marshall Solar Farm has set aside 40% of the land for pollinator habitat. This includes planting native vegetation and wildflowers that provide habitat for bees, butterflies, and pollinators. The environmental benefits of the pollinator habitat at the Marshall Solar Farm helps to support local ecosystems by providing food and shelter for pollinators. This can help to promote biodiversity and support the health of local plant and animal populations. Partnerships. The Marshall Solar Farm has partnered with the University of Minnesota Bee Lab and the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation to conduct research on the benefits of pollinator habitats at solar farms. The project has also partnered with local organizations and schools to promote education and outreach about the importance of pollinators. Well, thank you very much for listening to my first lecture. Was it too bookish? I thought I would leave this whiteboard up for a few minutes in case anybody would like to add any projects that they know about in any of these 5 existing areas of post-human infrastructure that are currently going on. I believe you can cut and paste them right on, and don't worry about them being in neat rows. We can do it later. And while that's going on, if anybody wants to multitask and ask me any questions or help boost my confidence and tell me that you understood what I was talking about, that would be terrific.
Just thank you, Lauren. Super rich. I experienced your talk and share as super rich and inspired and diverse and complex, and I can't wait to dive in more.
Thank you, Harold.
I love how beautiful the Bosco Verticale is in Italy. And I really appreciated too, this kind of note about the structure itself and kind of the pros and cons. Can you speak to any of like the pros and cons maybe of these type of infrastructures that you know, like this one, the Bosco, or I mean, it's so beautiful.
Well, I think for one, I think it's still focused on human beings rather than other than human beings. It doesn't really feel as much of a system work as it does a way to create an original facade. But it's still, the fact that it exists at all is, I think, worth mentioning. And that it seems to be doing fairly well is interesting. Do you have any more feedback on that, Alex, since you found it?
Yeah, when I was putting this together yesterday, I've always been curious about like the accessibility of those who maybe, you know, cannot afford to live in such buildings, or and I found that although I'm just going to read the note. While the building has received many accolades for its innovative design and sustainability features, there are also some criticisms of the project. One, it is high cost. Two is limited biodiversity, as you mentioned. And three is exclusionary. So some critics argue that the Bosco Verticale is an example of a green gentrification, as the building is marketed as a luxury development and may not be accessible to all members of the community. So that's like, those are some criticism I found regarding this building. I just only research criticisms just on the Bosco Verticale. I don't know about, but yeah, it's yeah, that's what I found.
That was great, Lauren. I love great presentation. Also, I'm super interested in the living shorelines. I mean, they were all great, but you know, spending all that time, a lot of the travels that I was doing was along the coastlines, kind of seeing the devastation that's happening there. There's some interesting work in and around oysters and oyster reefs, right? And the amount of cleansing they do without any, you know, they don't need any input, basically. So there's a project in New York called the Billion Oysters Project, and it's really super interesting. I'll put together a little thing and stick it on there, but really has activated the community around cleaning up the bay there. And then also, you know, I don't have one off the top of my head, but there's a ton of projects around mangrove restoration, because we've wiped out so much of the mangroves along our coastlines here, but around the world. And they're really kind of one of the first buffers of protection. So it'd be interesting. I know it's a lot of community groups that get together for those types of activities, but, you know, then adding in some sort of artistic, you know, another layer onto it so that it's not just restoration would be really interesting to look at. How to get more people involved and understand the benefits of mangroves.
Thank you, Kelly.
I'd also like to add to that, conversely, where I live, we have too many mangroves because of nitrogen runoff from farms. And so we're actually in areas removing mangroves because they're choking the estuaries so much. So there's that on every level, you know, how much input and control do we have on our living coastlines, and how much do we just leave them to their own systems?
And that's always the interesting issue, right? Of like, one place has too much water, one place has too little water, too many mangroves, too few mangroves. It's not one size fits all for all these bigger infrastructural human ecologies. So.
I see a couple of little emoji hands. Did Elise or Michelle want to share something or have a question?
I think Elise's hand was raised first, so I'll let them go if they'd like to speak first. And maybe they stepped away, so I'll just make my point really briefly. I really love this presentation. I did make a note in the chat that one of the highlighted projects in the Green Roofs and Walls section is at a place that I visit all the time, and I just wasn't aware of how involved it was. It's actually installed just kind of like tucked away near where a lot of the restrooms are at the garden. And it's just this like very kind of surprising element, I think, in the experience of just kind of navigating the space. So I was really happy to see it, and I'm excited to see it in a new way the next time that I visit. I think I wanted to just also add a note on the concept behind green architecture in general. I live in a city that is, I'm based in Philly, just as a reminder, that is growing very rapidly in terms of the construction of new apartments and hotels and other corporate kind of structures. And one thing that really fascinates me about living architecture is the way in which it can be this very involved, very informed project on one hand, with really great intentions to have this sustainable impact on, you know, providing more greenery to this space that it occupies. And then on the other hand, I tend to see a lot of green architecture being constructed in ways that I think from a scientific standpoint might be less involved and tend to be a little bit more decorative in terms of the value that it brings. So I think I thought that was interesting. I think, you know, the intentionality behind having the visual, the strikingly visual element of seeing greenery aligned with, you know, cement or steel and these other kind of building materials, it does provide this opportunity for there to be a lot of surface level projects related to that. And I'm interested in just, you know, seeing, just to see the different ways that it can manifest.
I appreciate.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, is that you, Elliot?
Yes. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for make some utopia for me in my life, that a lot of artists and designer meeting and speak about subject very interesting, I think, about water. So really it is good to speak about this and to share this idea and to think more about the future in generation, how we can make something can help them to understand what is waiting them, what we can do for this future. So really, if I speak, I like to speak about my memories with water, because I am from city. It was the capital of water in Romanic civilization in Tunisia, because I am from Tunisia, from Carthage. My city was calling Aquayeta Kipantani. So it's her name now. It's El Hama. El Hama is mean in Arabic. It is the place where is the water, mineral hot water. So I have a lot of relationship with water. Always I touching the hot water. I playing with this water. I feel this connection between the water and the tree, between the water and me, how this water make my place in the south of Tunisia. Almost it is very hot weather and Sahara, but this water makes life. They give me the green. I can see the green around me, even that the weather is not comfortable for make something green. So if we back to the religion, God say in Holy Quran, say we make from the water everything alive. So, and if you back to history, all civilization, like Egyptian civilization, like Canaanic in Iraq, like Maya, like all civilization was before near and close of water resource, a river, or I don't know. So what's it's a research, but they looking always for water. So what I want to say that exactly, and a very short idea. If we think to work about something about the future generation and how we can show the importance of the water, I think we need to put this in program of a school, and maybe we are now adult, and We should go down to age of the new generation. I think now children and kids are more relationship with technology, with the telephone, with computer. So if we think about design of game, computer game, that show how the importance of water. So I think it will be interesting also to work like this between artist and designer and technology and computer designer. So if we think like this, how we can be near and close for minded of children to make them see what is this important of water, what is waiting us in the future. So I think always I say this, artist and designer who can change the world, because political people make always problem, religion people always make a problem. So it is our time to work about this and to think how we can help our generation now and the future. So it is nice to work about artwork and to make something design. And I like the hard on the water, under the water. It is very interesting. And the idea, it is very good. Also, I like also we can think about how we can make like a game or computer game in the internet or in Play Store or iPhone store that children can using and can see what is this important of water. That is all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being with us from very far away. Jamie Grace, did you have anything you wanted to add? Your hand is up, your cyborg hand.
Yes, I do. In reading and listening to these different projects, it occurred to me, this just like popped into my mind, the personal project I've been working on that I started last year, 2 years ago, when I did my 17-foot steel sculpture. It's actually a sculpture in the flight patterns of birds, and it's a place for them to rest, nest, and digest, and to have a stopover and a drink of water in a very hot place. And I've had a few ideas based on my travels through different cities to have sculptures specifically for birds, because they're always moved off of the things, displaced. And I thought, oh my gosh, that actually fits in the category of post-human infrastructure, especially if there was kind of a chain. So it was a realization like, wow, I didn't see that connection before.
You're right on the path to your first speculative ecology. I think Elias, when you're not talking, will you put the little mute button on? It's on the left side of the Zoom. Thank you. Sorry. Alex, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, really quick. I just realized that another meaningful case study of post-human infrastructure connected to birds is this window that basically was inspired by the way birds, as they fly at very heights, they avoid spider webs. So the designers were interested in how do they avoid spider webs. And in order to reduce the number of birds that die from this collision with windows, they created a window pattern where birds can see sort of like this pattern of the spider web, but humans cannot see it because birds can see ultraviolet wavelengths. So I'll add that into the chat. It's a really cool project that reduces, it's the design is more for the more than human world than it is for humans, because humans don't see the pattern on the windows.
So I wanted to, I don't know if everybody can see the whiteboard I just put up, but this is one of the works I did with Metabolic Studio, 100 mules walking the Los Angeles Aqueduct. And I'm bringing it up for a number of reasons. One of them is that in order to really understand the relationship between the site that my studio practice is based on, the edge of the LA River, by the 32-acre park that was once a train yard, and before that, a floodplain of the unbridled LA River. It's involved a 240-mile research-based practice that has taken me to the highest point in the contiguous North American continent, which is Mount Whitney, the Eastern Sierra, from which the snow had provided since 1913 all of the water that allowed Los Angeles to grow into a city. And before I began 100 Mules walking the Los Angeles Aqueduct, I was very aware of the critical role that the mule played in the construction of infrastructure of the Greater West. So George Washington had actually made his fortune by importing mules from Europe to Washington, and specifically to Virginia, where he started a mule trade. Now, mules are thousands of years old, but they are the first animal that humans created, like we're computing systems today, creating artificial intelligence systems. We created the mule to do our work for us. They're half horse, half donkey. They can't replicate themselves on their own. They are a cyborg creature. They were created to do our work and specifically build our infrastructure. So to ride with 100 mules, to create a line large enough that it could be seen from a satellite or a helicopter, and get permission to walk the federal infrastructure of the LA Aqueduct was a really good way to begin to build a conversation about a post-human infrastructure by acknowledging labor, the labor force that builds these systems, by acknowledging that they still exist. When we finished with them, we just let them loose in the deserts of the Intermountain West, where they become infrastructure builders again. They're out there divining where water is in the desert. They travel around, and with their hooves, they can smell and scratch wells in the desert. They drink their fill, and then they leave the water for other creatures of the desert, the bobcats, the coyotes, the roadrunners, the birds, the tortoises. So they have modeled for us for thousands of years service to humanity, service to other living systems, and the ability to provide infrastructure. So I bring this to you as a segue to move into our writing prompt. Artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. Let's move back into this idea of speculative ecology now. Let's move into the beginning of using language to shape a speculative ecology in 10 minutes that you can then read out loud. Each of us will have 3 minutes to read. We'll go around the space and read them. The prompt is, artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. Begin a speculative ecology that refers to that idea. It can be embodied, it can be experienced, or it can be imagined. Let's get started. Feel free to write on this whiteboard, or feel free to write on a piece of paper, or feel free to just draw and speak through inspiration when it's your turn. It's always 11:11, one of my favorite times. And we'll come back together in 10 minutes. Okay. So shall we begin imagining together? Let's not respond to, let's read one person to the next and no feedback between them all, because if we do that, we might just finish before our class is finished. And I think we should use the chat bar for comments. And should we do it in a popcorn way? That somebody starts and then just ping pongs it to somebody else?
Yes, I love that idea.
I'll start. I'm going to choose to start. And if you don't want to read for whatever reason, you can simply, or say, just say all my relations and pass it on. This is a no pressure class though. I'm going to ask Jasmine to start.
Hi. Yeah, so I was reflecting on my band Fuck You Pay Us, which is a Black punk band about reparations and about care. And so I was just reflecting on expanding even my notion of reparations. And this is something I've already been doing. I've been thinking about like reparations as something that is care, it's attention. And so I was also thinking about this way of like the throat chakra medicine that comes from just speaking the words of these things, like that as a medicine, that is something that will pass down through my generations. And then I thought about economic freedom models for our Black Americans and about that could be an element to even the music we bring, like bringing in these new economic models as a way of like even just sharing the power of the music. And then I've been offering these like classes and things, and I'm thinking about like even offering a music class that centers on Black music legacy makers, and like that as like, I feel like we often think about musicians just for what they produce, not what produced them, not what gave them grace, what gave them life, and about these models of like caring for musicians beyond just what they can do. And that as being a part of that throat chakra medicine, a part of that like healing of bonds, a part of that like reparations as care work that this could go through my mind. Was that 3 minutes? Sorry if I went over.
You actually have 20 seconds, but you can pass it on.
Okay, I'll just say Fupu. That's the name of my band.
You popcorn it to someone else, Jasmine. Thank you.
Okay, I'll pass it over to Jamie.
Hey, hi. Wow, that was a great share. Thanks for popcorning it. I wrote a tiny bit on speculative ecology of emotions. I'd like to see a world where there are more types of relationships. We are still dominated by a post-war nuclear ideology of ways of relating that centers around white heteronormativity. And I think that's extremely limiting and unfulfilling for, there's so many ways of relating. We spoke about relating to water. We spoke about relating to animals. A very common relation in Indigenous practices is the older grandfather and the younger children. And now that's virtually taboo in certain spaces because of a predominant fear culture. And so opening up the conversation about ways of relating and including more healthful ways of relating, everything from artist to muse, and it not having to be a certain thing. I can only begin to think about, plant relations and where those are valued, elevated, and seen as important as other kinds of relations in the dominant public sphere. So with that, I will pass and I will popcorn that over to Constance.
I come from not really being able to imagine the large the largeness of this scale that is being discussed. And I realize that my own work is very, very body centric for the people that are working with me in a dancer movement group. And so if it's my intention to think about imagine larger, I'm imagining the two places that I live, like the lack of renewable energy, the lack of the use of the sun and the wind and the sea. And I don't know yet what I could bring together or imagine, but somehow inspiring or thinking about the possibility of using the natural energies that are there to help to help switch those two environments from all of the electricity and all of the gas and all of the stuff that we're using now. So first thoughts. Thank you. And I will pass it over to Michelle.
Thank you so much. I'm going to time myself and I'll just read what I wrote in my notes here. My current body of work is the inception of this web of oil paintings that depict different imagined spaces, and they're connected through color. I primarily use blue. I like the call to the idea of blueprinting, and they're also connected through repeated visual elements. Each of the spaces are comprised of this amalgamation of real places and things that I experience, as well as other visual references that I consume, digitally through, media and just, as I move through the world. I consider it to be kind of a mind map, and it kind of reflects, I think, things that I'm thinking about subconsciously, and it is being built in real time. To the question about how it plans, I actually think there's a lack of plan that goes with it. There's a plan in terms of the composition of the spaces, but in the way that the web evolves and is built, it's a little bit more organic. A lot of the things are just ideas that I think of, and then once I sketch and get to canvas, I'm just kind of referencing what I created and also just adding things as I think of them. I envision this web to be this kind of ongoing, very mobile infrastructure that would invite the audience to speculate on memory and what is real and not real. There's this mixture of hyper-realistic elements and really surreal visual elements. And it invites the viewer to kind of participate in this collective imagination about the human relationship with the natural world as we know it, and also kind of the systematically designed infrastructures that we experience. And I will pass it on to Rainey.
Hey, so this is an idea actually I've been thinking about for a long time, and now it has a home. So I'm really excited. I'm obsessed with trees, and we share this crazy amount of DNA with them, and they are this other intelligence that we have so much to learn from. So I'm both a visual artist, but I'm also a mover and a dancer, and I'm interested in a work that is a very embodied kind of knowing. And sensors have become so sophisticated now. There's so much we can do with them. And structurally, my idea is that in some way we would sensor up a forest, but we would also have sensors on our own bodies, and there'd be some translation so that we could both understand their experience and they could understand ours in some way, some dialogue. I don't know sort of what that thing happens in the middle, but I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I feel like it's this, literally, I've been calling it the empathy interface, because it's this place that we connect and can begin to understand each other. And it's very speculative because I have no idea how to make that happen. let's see. How about, who hasn't gone yet? Alexandria.
I'll just read what I wrote, my free writing. My current art practice is focused on constructed floating wetlands made of natural materials. Constructed floating wetlands mimic the functions of wetlands, such as nutrient cycling. Constructed floating wetlands create habitat above and below the waterline through the growth of plants and their roots on a buoyant mat. Above, they create habitat for birds, pollinators, and mammals. Below, for fish and diverse communities of fungi, algae, and bacteria known as periphyton, who attach themselves on the roots of plants. The continuous growth cleans and restores water by amplifying the natural processes occurring between sunlight, water, plants, and microorganisms. Unlike Band-Aid solutions to tackle nutrients pollutions coming from stormwater runoff, pesticides, fertilizer, constructed wetlands work in nature's time. I envision a scenario where the community connects with the local ecological knowledge of place, harvests the plants so they can build their own floating wetlands, plant them, and participate into the healing of the web of life. That's my speculative, but I think, yes, that's my speculative ecology for now, but I will continue to develop. Sorry, I will pass it on to Roy.
Alexandra, I wrote the form of questions, like thinking about it made me like develop a few questions. I pasted it on the chat so you can follow what I read. What life can grow inside and around the icy corridors of servers where the recording and data from our conversation about post-human infrastructure will be stored? How can the management of data centers and undersea cables reverse the high water consumption and high demand for coal and electricity to make our infrastructure imaginaries sustainable? How recognizing the life of the life that encrusts on the submarine cables that transport our data across the oceans can be part of an artistic practice that fosters better relations between the ocean and communication undersea infrastructure? How can artistic practice pressure data center and submarine cable industries to take initiatives that consider the animal and plant life that exists in their surroundings? That's it. I think these questions relate with my practices, and yeah, that's it. And I pass to Teresa.
Thank you. I wrote about a community garden that I participated in New York. And I'm currently rewilding a space that belongs to the city in San Francisco. So I wrote about Liz Christie. Liz Christie created urban gardens with seed bombs made from balloons and sometimes condoms. Some of the garden spaces were given to the city and people of New York in land trusts. The garden I served in was once a pile of bricks that are now paths and a grotto between buildings in the once blighted Alphabet City. People hold weddings and events in these spaces that were non-places. The seeds had to make it over fences. 6BC is still watered by permitted use of fire hydrant in a series of ponds. And I'll pop in a picture. And then I pulled up the website, and it turns out that 6BC is a proud participant in Gardens Rising, a $2 million state grant to install rainwater capture systems and other projects to mitigate storm water runoff in more than 40 community gardens in the East Village and Lower East Side. New York City Community Garden Coalition is administering the grant partnership with Green Thumb. It's kind of long, but the city sees that community gardens are space savers for future development. That was kind of before, and now they see them as green infrastructure, and they hold water runoff, keep people's basements from flooding. And that's a new development since I worked in that garden. So it was really interesting to see. And it's just amazing that the trees are full-size trees. It's New York City, it gets all the elements, and this was literally a pile of rubble in the 70s. And I will pass it to, who hasn't gone yet? Kelly, have you gone yet?
This Kelly or the other Kelly? Because I can go.
Yeah, I'm
Okay, awesome. Okay, so my research and art practice pursues the minerality of screens, central to onlineness, to ask what are the ways we can metabolize the screen? And in an embodied, intimate way of encapsulating breath, my neon practice made from scrap glass repurposes lucent wavelengths to grow moss and algae, to elicit the fruiting of fungi, beckon renewal from what is left to landfill. If tube worms and their bacteria are making life from methane and sulfur seeping from the oceanic crust, no further leap to imagine ways we can team up with microorganisms to metabolize the man-made methane problem of landfills. Oh, and I will popcorn this over to Jack.
Okay. So I just posted mine in the chat. On a planet of mega metropolises, we find the all-pervasive grid of modernism that is like a matrix, a lattice of trains, cars, and commercial activities. The matrix is driven by a codex of rules and variables that create a modernist grid. The grid forms streets and forms the towers. What if this matrix was hacked and its grid transformed? We could see a globalized planetary system of metropolises undergo metamorphosis into ecological systems. What would that be like to witness, visualize, and construct? Each component that is attached to the modernist matrix would be augmented. Office towers may become vertical gardens, boulevards may become tree canopies. Perhaps the scale of destruction that is the megalopolis is an opportunity. What if the global planetary matrix is a potential energy that can be reversed or transmogrified into another direction of manifestation, in which the biosphere is now the driving force of design decision-making? I'll popcorn it to Mohit.
I have a couple of words as a response in my mind. So I was thinking about the previous catastrophes which has become a oil in this earth, which is coming out as resource for human society, which is building a different infrastructure. So the previous catastrophe is building or becomes some sort of resource for the current industrial function. So this point was something holding in my mind, this kind of older catastrophe after some time becomes a certain kind of resource for the next generation. So this kind of protection from something. So also thinking about whenever some infrastructure take place, it also marginalizes communities. It also marginalizes people. How to think about that particular point then. Thinking about waste infrastructure, where particular community, indigenous communities working historically and working in the toxic sites. Also thinking about animals who lives on the toxic site, sustain their life, and looking at their kind of different way of finding nutrition for their bodies, nutrition for human exterminates. Yeah, and thinking about the labor within the infrastructure also. And some sort of, and this kind of artist needs to create and is compared into some sort of scale, how to measure, what's the kind of measurement of that scale. Yeah, these are some thoughts I come up with. And I will pass to Harlow, I think.
Thank you. Thanks for that inspired share. A vision, thinking small, tiny, minuscule, humble, then able to perceive the wondrous networks of energy, life, forces, ancestors that exist, and then ask, invite, request, even gently channel them into what? A confederation of tea farmers, artists of flora and soil, mediums not creatable, but living and existing before us on this continent. And then inviting other artists, designers, friends, using other mediums and materials, nodes in a different network of tea spaces, also tiny, minuscule, humble, where humans can go and connect, be real, share not just their visions and aspirations, but also their traumas and sorrows, acknowledging and releasing them so as to not project unconsciously onto the myriad other forms and species and earth places, while also communing, ingesting, partaking of elixirs brewed in collaboration with the tree and plant nations and the soil nation that supports us all. I will tap Nick next.
My hand's full at the moment. I just re-popcorn if that's okay. To Yiva, if someone could come back to me though, that'd be great.
Hi, thanks. So I'm not going to read exactly what I'm going to summarize, but I've worked with lots of different mediums as an artist. I'm constantly exploring new ones. I kind of always want to learn something new, always want to try something. And reflecting on this, I realize most of the art I make, I guess, is for humans. I make for people to consume my art, or a lot of times it's like as a gift. Or my background is actually in biology, so the other type of art I've done is a lot of observational art or documenting. So this idea of trying to think about how to reframe my art for considering people like outside of humans is a question I really have to think about, because I'm not sure how to navigate that. And my biggest passion is in music. So I like to sing for people. I like to create, I like to tell stories. And I guess when it comes to this idea of creating on a scale the society has the capacity to destroy, one of the things I also work with is I'm Armenian, so I do a lot of like Armenian folk music, and I try to reinterpret and work with songs that have been lost or almost lost or recovered. A lot of these songs have been destroyed. So this idea of like what society has the capacity to destroy, when I'm thinking about the music that I work with, a lot of it was destroyed. And so I try to preserve it in the way I can so other people can listen to it and interact with it. So I don't know, these are just things I'm thinking about. I've never really thought about my art practice in this way. So I'm excited to keep thinking about it throughout the rest of the class. And I'm gonna popcorn it to, let's see, who hasn't gone yet? Jess, did you go?
I could go.
Okay. Okay.
So rather than speculative, I went very concrete into the weeds with urgency and speed. I dream of the poetics of brush clearing, to respectfully pull all the invasive plants, allowing the native botany to hold purchase on the landscape. Brush clearing as meditation practice, brush clearing as exercise. Brush clearing is a practice of biomimicry, allowing the habitat to lead. Then research clearing a grassy plot to see what native plant seeds are dormant under the mat. It's lovely when violets show themselves. They're a great ground cover. Also, who shows up in the opening? Elderberry starts, pagoda dogwood babies, sedum, berries, of course. Who wants to go? Who hasn't gone?
I can go. So while thinking about like sorry, I'm forgetting the word, but something that I was just thinking about is a lot of my practice and what I do as a creator is essentially reclamation work as an Indigenous person in diaspora. And a lot of what I aim for is storytelling for my people group and other who are land-based people who are essentially needing to re-navigate what it means to be a land-based person when so much land throughout the world has been stolen. And something that I wrote down, sometimes being brought down to nothing is the key to reclaiming everything. Man-made destruction being reversed by man-made dreams and hopes to reimagine something better. Post-apocalyptic narratives driven by fear and realities too horrific to fully comprehend. Sometimes rebuilding bridges to land equals reconnecting your body and spirit. Oh, I guess I popcorn it to Nicholas and his baby.
Thank you. Would you mind repeating the line about reducing down to nothing?
Sure. Sometimes being brought down to nothing is the key to reclaiming everything.
Thanks. I really like that. Yeah, the sun has risen outside and the sun has risen inside. My practice is in architecture, and recently we, in the area we're living at the moment, had witnessed a really bad cyclone and flooding. And what really pervaded me through the events was the feeling that it wasn't a bad thing, but it was sort of publicly seen as like something that was really bad for the environment and bad for the people that live here. But it was, I always thought of it as it was the environment doing its thing, you know, and it started raising this awareness of all of the places in our world where we as society compete with nature and we don't see ourselves as a part of nature. And so I've been looking at the rivers and where the rivers want to go, and how we choke and control the rivers behind stop banks, combined with this idea of coastal managed retreat, which is a concept I think is found around the world. And this idea that the word retreat is a very charged phrase. It speaks of conflict, it speaks of me versus something. And yeah, those are my thoughts so far. I muted myself prematurely. I'll call myself to, is there anyone who hasn't? I'm just scrolling through everyone. Is Elias, have you gone?
Yes, I am here. Hello.
We can hear you. Would you like to share what you wrote about for 3 minutes?
Hello. I don't know if you hear me or not.
We hear you.
Hi guys. I want to tell you something about also my experience. I am anyway. I am teaching interior design in university, and as I told you, I am from south of Tunisia. So what I want to share with you that people here close to me in Sahara, before to think that when will be rain or how we'll get the water from underground, they think how to build a house and how to make some places to keep the water what they get for his camel and for his children and for his kids. So I learned from this that architecture or design it is can give you opportunity for life. So if we think deeply about this simple idea, because these people doesn't suffering from this, but they update with the situation. So if we update with our new situation and we can see how we can survive and how we can be strong against what we have in the future, and how can design and art help us to get the how can I say the bad effect, how we protect ourselves by design and by the art. For that, I want to share with you this because I see how camels in Sahara are surviving for a long time without water, and how they are proud about this surviving. So it is really interesting for me to see this and give me a lot of energy and a lot of ideas. So I really like if I can invite you all here to see this, it would be fine for me. But anyway, I will try to share with you the most possible about this with you. Thank you. And who want to speak? I don't know, maybe Jimmy, maybe Jack, who want?
I already read, so someone else can.
Yeah. I'll share real quickly before I think everyone else is gone. And I wanted to drop a couple of images from an app on Discord called Midjourney. And I was exploring a while ago about this huge topic that we're discussing, which feels huge. And when I thought about how any real change can take place within our human world, I thought about culture, and then I thought about homes. And I work with earth and soil as a potter. And what I saw when I meditated on it is if everybody was assigned a tree and you build your home around the tree, and we had technology very similar to what Rainey was saying, that we had technology that connected to the trees that actually gave us updates about the health of the tree, and that would correlate to the health of your home. And then we had networks of villages that had all their trees interconnected into a network of communication to say, hey, this home is low on water, or this home needs more power. If we could utilize the wisdom of trees to teach us how to have healthier communities with AI technology or some sort of technology in the future, I feel that would create a massive change for us humans, the way we live. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you, everybody. That was incredible. Now, I took the liberty of writing notes from what everybody had said. And I put it all into an AI program with no names. And I thought that I would, in the spirit of Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed, practice the idea that we moved towards stream of conscious writing that is each of ours, into a collective voice, which is all of ours combined. So I put all of the random notes I took from all of your shares and put it into an AI writer, and I will read to you our first collective piece of speculative ecology as a cohort. To the prompt, artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. Tea farmers think small, using alternative mediums and materials to create a network of tea spaces where people can connect and share their traumas, and where elixirs can support us all. As we think about preserving music, we also think about place, and places like Armenia, which we may never have considered before. And as we delve into the poetics of brush clearing, we find that native botany holds the key to the landscape. Brush clearing allows us to research and discover the beauty of the earth, and it's a lovely thing when violets show themselves. As an Indigenous person in diaspora, I find myself at a crossroads of storytelling and redefining what it means to be land-based when so much land has been stolen from us. Yet amidst the man-made destruction, there is a sense of post-apocalyptic reconnection between our bodies and spirits. And as we explore disturbance ecology, we discover that it's the key to biodiversity. As we consider the remnants of past catastrophes and the seeping oil in the earth, we recognize that it's a resource for the next generation, but also a source of marginalization for those who live amidst the toxic sites. Fuck you, pay us becomes a cry for understanding what life can grow around service. We contemplate how data centers and undersea cables can make our infrastructure sustainable, and how generative models can foster more diverse relationships. Oil paintings and randomness merge in a web of collective imagination, but it's human relationships that remain at the forefront. Trees become an obsession, and we envision censoring forests and ourselves, translating through an empathy interface. We imagine creating constructed floating wetlands, nutrient wetlands that exist above birds and mammals and below fish and fungi and bacteria. Community gardens and seed bombs launched with balloons become a means of rewilding space and reclaiming what has been lost. We see the potential in salvaging junk and hacking the modernist grid into an ecological system where office towers become vertical gardens and boulevards become tree canopies. It's time to embrace the biosphere as the driving force of design decision-making, and to create a new economic model that fosters a better relationship with the planet. Not bad for class one. Kelly, as a guest listener today, would you like to offer anything up?
That's a hard act to follow. But that was an amazing piece of writing that hopefully, Lauren, you can post and we can kind of pull out all the pieces. I think, you know, it's really interesting to see kind of the threads that run through everybody's thought process and work, and really coming down to kind of the minuscule of the molecular, kind of the soil and the threads that connect us, and the community that we all feel need to actually also be part of those threads. And it's just, I'm very impressed, and it was wonderful to be able to sit in on this first class, and looking forward to hear how it goes as you guys move through. But thank you for inviting me, Lauren.
Well, thank you for joining us, Kelly, and thank you everybody for this creative first studio class in post-human infrastructure that I've ever taught. So thank you for hanging in there with me. You know, I really wanted to move from seminar into embodied practice and to allow us to go into our own experience, but through the interface of technology, which brings us together, think about what we can get out of this very quickly, because I think there's enough in this first piece of writing for the entire 7-week course of speculative ecology. So I've left all of what the notes I wrote in the chat bar, and I will send them all to you, because that was just one AI, my iteration. I welcome you to play with that and put it into our class notes. And we will continue to spin together. I will formulate our second class in my second lecture based on the first class. I want this 7-week class to be random and personal. As somebody who's trusting me with your time, I want to craft this class around you and where you are in the world and what you bring to the class, so that we can get out of it something collectively and individually together. So each week I'll go back into a meditation based on what we do and the feedback I get from you, and try and personally craft our next class. And we'll have those notes and readings up for you before the weekend that are based on what we did today. And we'll go from there. Before we close, again, gratitude for trusting me and each other, making yourself vulnerable in this way to one another. And I'm so thankful to be spending time and space with each of you. Every day, except for today, because I need to go to Palm Springs, I will hold office hours after class directly. So if anybody wants to meet with me one-on-one, I think there's a framework to ask for that on the Alternative Art School. And I wanted to thank Alex for helping me with the whiteboard on infrastructure. All those resources are available for all of you, I believe. And thank you, Mary Rose, for your support in this class, and for reading at the beginning and helping with the chat bar. And I look forward to sharing more with you all next week.
Okay, thank you very much.
I
want to say
one other thing. I'm sorry, so sorry. I wanted to announce that in connection with this class, we are holding a seminar-based learning and mending on James Bridle's Ways of Being each Tuesday, starting next Tuesday, the 4th of April at 5:30 Pacific time. This series has been curated by Alex in the class. And Kelly, she is working with Alex and AI on a more than human network of flyer art, which you can see on the school, I think it's Opportunities platform. And I highly recommend it if you can make it. If you can't make it, all of the PDFs that we're reading will be on our Discord. So if you do join Water Community Power, you'll see Learning and Mending. This is Metabolic Studio's 11th Learning and Mending series, and all of the PDFs from all of our previous syllabi are on there, some of which might be useful in your own personal research. So again, please do join this public free reading curated by Alex, supported by Kelly on Tuesday, if you can. And if you can't, feel free to read I'll put it on the class notes too, so you can read the PDFs because it's meant to be a compendium to our conversation on post-human infrastructure. So even if you can't come, I'd love you to have it. Sorry, I think I interrupted you, Elias. Did you want to share something?
Yes, just I want to. I am very happy for this conversation, and just I have big wish that this will be spread everywhere, and we make note for our in our country everywhere, because really I don't like to see war in the future because of water, like we see the war in the past because of petrol. So I think this is very important to understand this, because we should look this problem of water from artist view, not from other one. Really, it is very touchable for me, because I don't like to see something happen like we see before, like a war, like something like this, because of water. So let's to hug this world, because it is for us, and we belong for this world, and this world belong us, and everyone have this world inside him, and everyone will be after belong from, even after our death, will back to this world. So just to keep this in very lovely and very peaceful way. So thank you. Just I want to say this.
Thank you. And Mary Rose has kindly posted the link to the Eventbrite. And if you want to sign up, you can, or just follow Metabolic Studio on Eventbrite, and then you'll always be able to see what's next. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. See you in a week.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Alex and Mary, can you stay on a sec?
Bye, baby.
Bye. Oh, so sweet.
I know. Okay.
Recording.
I'll turn off the recording.